Okay, so I'm back online, continuing development of this dungeon. I did just start half an hour ago, but deleted that video and started again because I forgot to turn the notifications off on my PC, and as I'm sharing the full screen, it was possible to see email addresses when they popped up on notifications, and obviously I want to protect other people's data from my personal life, so turned off those notifications and am starting again. Won't bother with very lengthy introductions. I'm Irongron, the server owner, creative lead of Arelith. I've been working on streaming this dungeon and I'm just continuing it now. I'm doing so unannounced, just because I really want to be able to get on with work. But if anyone does have questions, they can ask on the official Discord, which is where this is streaming, and also on Twitch, where it streams. Most of our viewers tend to come in through our official Discord. I mean, for comparison, I think our official Discord's got about 2,000 members, and my personal Twitch account has like 18 followers, so there's obviously a big difference. And now my 3-year-old's running in the room to ask me something, so I just have to mute the microphone. When I play Neverwinter Nights, I'm one of these players that often has to go AFK. And, that's the reason. It doesn't really work playing online games and having small children, at least until they're in bed. So, someone was asking the other day, how much do I play compared to how much do I build? Well, I spend a lot more time building than playing because the tool set you can just keep coming and going from. But when you're actually playing a game with other people, it's frustrating for them to keep having to go AFK, and obviously it's not very good parenting either. But it's the summer holidays at the moment, so I have a bit more time to work, but it also means I have a house full of children. I do plan on doing some videos that are a basic introduction to the tool set to get people started. But most of the time it's just going to be my working on existing projects as I am now. But I will try and narrate what I'm doing when I think it's particularly important. And I will answer any questions that come through on Twitch or Discord as well. We did a big stream the other night which was announced that had a great many viewers online, and then afterwards, and I was joined by different developers and admins from the server that were able to field questions, so it had a more conversational tone. Unfortunately, the rest of the time, you're going to be left just listening to me, I'm afraid. So right now, I'm just laying down a great many traps. Keep in mind that if you're doing this when building an area, if you make the traps disarmable, which these ones that I'm putting down aren't, then rogues will be able to recover them, thus filling their inventory with traps. And if you have merchants that buy traps, that is a lot of free gold if the traps are decent. And if you have any kind of PvP on the server, then that many traps, particularly when they're powerful, can cause a problem. This dungeon, for instance, is in the Underdark, and Underdark players on Arelith are in the habit of raiding the surface And doing these flagstone traps, which I'm doing now, which I'm laying down roughly over the shape of particular flagstones, means there are a great many of them, and I'm using gas and sonic traps because they're the ones that cause parties the most problems. And I don't want people coming down here, filling their inventory with devastating traps and going up to the surface and laying them all out in the Temple of Sylvanus area outside the Elven settlement during raid roleplay. It wouldn't be a good move. So what I really need is a function that allows traps to be disarmed but not recovered. I don't believe one exists. So at the moment these can't be disarmed. So if characters want to pass over to them, they need to look carefully where they are and creep between them. But I am having a path which you can see along the mouse here, which will go here, 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 and then through there, where there will be less traps. So at the moment I'm just covering the section of floor where there isn't the route, which will have so many traps they will be kind of hard to avoid even when creeping. 4 children with me are playing together in the next room, but given their ages there can be disagreements, so you will hear that noise in the background, however much I tell them to be quiet. And I don't know, it doesn't do to tell children to be quiet too much. They are children after all, and making noise is part of that. What I do tend to like is just having music on while I'm developing. But having done that the other day, I realised that it gets flagged as copyrighted material. So if I'm wanting to run a Twitch stream, I can't do it with my usual musical accompaniment without potentially risking having the channel shut down. The other alternative is I listen to Neverwinter Nights music, but that isn't necessarily fun. Also not the kind of music I would choose to listen to in my personal life. So, okay, the route will go here, so this next section here is where I put down some more traps. Mentioned earlier I'm using sonic and gas traps because they cause parties the most problem. We do have custom traps on Arelith. I'm not using them here, and you can have traps that trigger certain spells that can also be very useful. But for the base traps, sonic and gas traps are generally the best ones to use because one will poison a party and the other will stun a party. Most of the other default trap types, other than negative, will just affect a single character and do damage. I'm sorry, I have to pause again. Okay, back again. Children playing a board game, which obviously isn't something they can do quietly without disagreements. Small children playing board games is different to adults. When they're that small, you're lucky if 20% of them know the actual rules. And those that do won't really agree with the others on what those rules necessarily are. So naturally conflict abounds. And that is the doorbell, so I have to go again. One moment. Obviously, the morning isn't the ideal time to play, or to build, rather. I shouldn't call it playing, it's far more serious than that, because there will keep being distractions. But really, when I'm this far through a dungeon and I have so far to go, I want to take every spare moment to try and get it done. You can see we've picked up a few viewers, despite my not announcing this on the official Discord. Maybe just one on Twitch. I'll check for questions in a minute. There's always a lot to think about when making dungeons, even if a lot of the actual tasks can be quite tedious. You always have to keep in mind what the parties using the dungeon will be doing, how quickly they will do it, and if you're creating any kind of diversity. Diversity is super important on Arelith because a lot of our players are regulars. By regulars, I mean they've played here for many, many years and will continue to play for many years to come. And so, that brings with it the very real risk of repetition. So having diversity. Oh, and hang on, I need to mute once more. So yeah, as I was saying, diversity is important, giving people a lot of characters, types to play, um, lots of different dungeons to explore, and having those dungeons not be entirely the same every time. So in this case, I've created two routes, just here and here. Now some characters are completists, they're going to want to go through both, but each route will have slightly different traps, slightly different obstacles, and then of course I can put in um, some rare enemies which we do across Arelith, so that always have a percentage chance of encountering something new here. So yeah, it's important that the game can be played in different ways. That's partially why I'm trying to do a lot of Underdark dungeons at short notice at the moment. The Underdark hasn't received any significant updates, significant content updates for some time. It's received a lot of sort of visual overhauls, both from myself and backcountry, but people that play here regularly, they've been doing the same dungeons for a very long time, or across all of their characters, and if I can get a dozen new dungeons in, then it really can help it feel fresh for those people that have been playing here for a very long time. And also with our recent writ changes, for those that don't know, if they're watching this on Twitch and don't actually play Arelith, writs are our quests. They can be obtained by writ agents, mostly in taverns, and they will require characters to go to certain locations and achieve certain goals. It isn't the most complex system, at least not yet. Most of these involve going to dungeons, killing select enemies or certain enemies, or in some cases exploring certain areas, as well as some courier routes. In return for doing these, you get an experience point and gold reward. That sounds pretty basic, but I originally came up with the idea to overcome one significant problem that plagued Arelith for many years, and that is that some dungeons are simply more rewarding than others. And this is to do with the difficulty of the creatures and what they carry, which again can be affected by what type of characters people are playing. Some builds will find some dungeons easier, some more difficult. But very often we had dungeons that were considered easy for experience points gain, easy for most characters, and other dungeons of a similar difficulty level in terms of the level of character they were aimed at that were considered far more challenging, and thus those dungeons were ignored. Now, the solution to this, at first glance, would be to make every dungeon entirely similar in terms of overall challenge, but that would make it really very boring. You don't want dungeons to all be totally balanced. Some dungeons, as I say, will suit certain builds. For instance, if your character has figured out that on Arelith using a bludgeoning weapon is generally more effective than using a slashing weapon in PvE content, then you might find an undead dungeon a lot easier than somebody that's running around with scimitars because they saw a spreadsheet that told them they were the most effective damage output per round in their PvP battles. But bludgeoning weapons are incredibly effective against oozes and undeads and undead and a number of other creatures. So a different dungeon might be easier or more difficult depending on what character you're playing, and balancing all dungeons equally would just make the game very dull. So by adding these quests, I can make up for any shortfall in the experience point gain by giving a dungeon a decent experience point reward for the associated quest. So for example, a dungeon that's considered very challenging in terms of how many experience points you get for how much time you spend there, I can put a hefty experience point reward on the associated writ. Conversely, if a dungeon is just really considered quite easy in terms of experience points gain per hour or per turn, then the reward for the quest is quite minimal. And the same goes for gold. Now, some creatures are going to have more wealth than others. If you're going to a dungeon full of spiders, then they're not going to be carrying gold. The same goes for a lot of creatures. They've not got gold or equipment. And so going to a dungeon can be incredibly costly, and therefore that dungeon ends up being avoided compared to one where people can make a lot of money. So, in this case, for the associated writ or quest, we put a big gold reward on it if the creatures themselves don't yield much gold. So that was the original sort of thinking behind this system. And the system has been changed recently in a way that I always intended but didn't feel we had enough writs, that each writ can only be done once. This has the effect that during the course of a character's life, they will visit every dungeon rather than choose to visit the same dungeon repeatedly, which anyone familiar with the Orc clans of Arelith will be extremely aware that was a real problem. I mean, there were some great dungeons on the server that just weren't visited because a lot of people playing the game sadly still are just concerned with grinding to maximum level and will choose to do so wherever they perceive that to be the easiest. There is a kind of downside of writs. It can be done a number of times a day, and you could make an argument that it encourages players to log off once they've done their daily amount, waiting for 24 hours to pass so they can log in again. I hope that's not the case. I've not really analysed the data to see, but it could well be. So, okay, I've made a mistake here. I shouldn't have put these traps down here. I want that route to go a different way. Not concentrating while I'm talking is obviously the issue. As I say, the route should go this way, so in this case I want to fill this section with traps. So I will check messages soon if there are any questions. As I say, unlike the other streams, this wasn't announced in any of our chats, so I'm expecting viewers to be at a minimum and therefore questions. But if you are waiting for an answer, I just want to get these traps out of the way. This is not a fun process. If anyone's watching and wondering what tile set this is, this one is the Versatile Dungeon. I forget the name of the developer that made it, but it can be downloaded on the Neverwinter Nights Vault. The link is on our main page. There's a few different versions of it. It looks really nice. It has ceilings, really nice textures. Just not a lot of tile groups. So this is one of these tile sets, like a lot of hack content, that you have to be prepared to use a lot of lighting and placeable to give it a theme, because it's not got any sort of theme baked in, which is presumably why they called it Versatile. You need to be aware when choosing hack tile sets. Have an expert look at it. Make sure there are no obvious bugs or issues that you might not notice at first glance. Sometimes this can be with the walk mesh. Other times it can be with just misaligned tiles. So, okay, now we have our route. Characters come in here, can walk down here, get in these doors. So, along the safe route, I will add some traps, but very few, so they can more easily be avoided. characters needing to step gingerly, if only for a moment, will really help slow down their speed through the dungeon. Which, if the dungeon contains significant rewards you do want, there will always be... Sorry, I keep entering into spell traps by accident. There will always be parties that just want to run through a dungeon at maximum possible speed. They won't stop to read anything you put in there in terms of lore or to role play. They're just after getting as many experience points in the shortest time possible. And you know, if people want to play that way, I'm not going to tell the DMs to stop them or to punish them, but they should be expecting more challenge. You know, they might accidentally run into certain death. There's quite a strong chance of death. There's quite a few ways that can happen. The most obvious one is just springing traps. The other one is by using rare creature spawns that come with warning flavor text. If they're moving too quickly, they'll miss the clues and find themselves face to face with a creature they could otherwise have avoided. You know, and with some of the creatures on Arelith, I specifically designed them to be avoided. You know, these are creatures that are very hard to kill. And often these creatures will follow set patrol routes, so if you're watching them, you can avoid them. An example would be the Sentinel Orbs in the Illithid dungeon in the Underdark. Sand Golems, giant sand golems I think they're called, in the Sibayad tombs, and a few others here and there. And characters that are running at high speed will just try and kill everything without reading descriptions and particularly thinking. One creature I use to slow down characters, or to at least make moving slowly more advisable, a creature that makes me very unpopular, is taken from D&D lore, and it is called the Slithering Tracker. Now, a Slithering Tracker has incredible perception skills, moves incredibly slowly, and will follow a character indefinitely until it can kill them. And I tend to have very few of these in any area, but if you're moving very quickly, then the creature appears stealthed. It's very hard to spot until it attacks you. You run straight past them and it starts following you. And then you run straight past another and that one starts following you too. And you keep running and you're moving too fast for all the slithering trackers that are slowly accumulating behind you until eventually you need to stop, and you stop for long enough for those that are following you to catch up. And if you are playing in one of these parties that decides you want to run around the Underdark wilderness at a million miles an hour, then suddenly you can stop and find yourself ambushed by 5 or 6 of them. They have really high sneak attacks, and if you're fighting more than 2 or 3, the combat is not going to go your way unless you're a pale master with a bludgeoning weapon. So yeah, I like the Slithering Trackers very much. They do what they're intended to, and you know, people will come on the forums and rage about them, but all I can say is if you're raging about them, then you're not being careful enough, because so long as you move slowly enough, you won't be fighting many at a time, probably only ever one at a time. And if you're being properly careful, you'll detect them before they detect you. So, you know, it's your choice how you play the game, but it makes absolute logical sense to me that if you're running around carelessly, then you're going to get into trouble. That's not me trolling the players. That is just, logic of design. Not an advantage if you're playing that way. But some people just won't care anyway. Possibly because our death penalties are so light currently, which was raised the other day by players. I won't go into it again now unless specifically asked to. Okay, that's enough of these traps. Okay, I save the module and just quickly check to see if there are any Discord messages. If you are asking messages, do so in development general on our forums. That's the place to do it. That's where I'll most commonly respond to. I can see we have just 5 viewers at the moment, much less than when I announced this, and none of them are asking questions or making comments. So I guess they're just silently watching. On Discord, on Twitch, we have 2 viewers, again, none of them watching. I have seen these Twitch videos are picking up a great many views after we finish them, some of them going above 90. Okay, lively particle. I suppose the question then is, why aren't you announcing these? I'm going to announce some of them. I'm going to announce them when I know in advance that I will definitely have time and that I won't quickly have to turn off. But sometimes, it's 11:30 a.m. here. Got a bit of time to keep developing. I wanted to make some progress, but I also wanted to be completist so people could see as much of this development process as possible online. So yeah, I only want to announce it when I know I can commit to being online for a long time. Probably when my children are in bed and yeah. So that's the reason why this wasn't announced. I'm happy to answer questions from those people that are here, but I did find the other day when I announced it, I mean, it went really well. We had Red Ropes and Grumpy Cat and Spire all on here chatting with me and lots of questions, but I worked very slowly, I must say. And I'd like to one day get this dungeon finished. One of my many bugbears with tile sets on Neverwinter Nights is that they contain such small doors. For the most part, every tile set has these tiny human-sized doors, despite the game having a great many large creatures. For me, that just seems incredibly senseless. I mean, this is especially true in the dungeon tile set. For a game called Dungeons and Dragons, you can't actually fit a dragon inside your dungeon. So characters will just stand outside a tiny door that the dragon can't get through, firing arrows at it. So because some of the creatures are quite large here, I'm hardly using any doors. I'm using these arches, so they'll have space to get through. Which is a bit of a shame because you can't see through doors, so you can always surprise characters. You can see a lively particle also asking me how long does it typically take. How many areas do I aim for when building a dungeon? I'll answer both of those questions separately, much as they're related. There. Oh, just one moment, actually. I just want to show you something with this placeable here. This is the Iron Maiden placeable, a new one. Now, one of the dungeons I recently made, I had a lever to open and close this. And this grisly description when you pulled the lever, and inside I'd managed to prop up a body using the rotation of bodies, so it looked like it was impaled. Fortunately, it didn't properly work because the placeable, while it can be open and closed, its node is a bit concealed, and I couldn't really get it so the characters could open and close it. But I'll just show you what I did here. I opened this. I took a body from Battlefield. These are custom bodies, but this is the one I want, you see, because he's got these wounds where he might be impaled. Or this guy, no, his arm's sticking out too far, so what I want to do is put this guy inside the Iron Maiden here with a big blood stain beneath. Doesn't really make sense that the Formians would be torturing people, to be fair. They're not, they're a lawful neutral race. It's more about practicality than murder. So, okay, yeah, I guess. I've just convinced myself torture equipment doesn't make sense. They're not going to have a torture room. I just need to mute briefly. I've got a queue of children waiting to ask me questions. Then I will come back and answer that question that was just asked. Okay, sorry about that. Questions from my two children take priority there. Okay, building a dungeon typically takes, I always underestimate how long it takes to build something. I say I'll be ready by this evening, and then 3 days later it's done. I mean, these streams are already at like something like 15 hours in total, and I've still not finished this dungeon. In fact, I'm only part way through it. That's partially because I'm talking while I'm doing it, but also because yeah, it can take time. So yeah, I mean, it depends on how much detail I'm wanting to go into. If you're writing a lot, if you're putting a lot of written content into a dungeon, then it takes a lot longer. In this case, I'm not going to do that because the Formians are quite an alien race, and they're not going to have texts lying around that characters will read. So I don't know. I mean, I might get, if I'm really concentrating and have a lot of time, I might get 2 or 3 dungeons done in a week, but that's when I'm kind of working full time. I'd say I could turn out a relatively decent dungeon in about 8 hours concentrated development time. But of course, it depends on the size and this, which you've said there, lively particle. How many areas do you aim for when building a dungeon? You have to keep in mind with that question that different players have different expectations and different amounts of time available. Some very casual players will not want to go into a dungeon that's 4 or 5 areas. Some of them, if you've only got so much time, you'll want to go and run around one area and then head back. A large dungeon could be a whole evening roleplay session for one party. So there needs to be a mix. In the Underdark, we have a lot of smaller dungeons, not many larger dungeons. This overall dungeon is going to be 7 areas, making it very large by Arelith standards. But yeah, I want to have some larger ones here. Generally, there should be at least two. You know. So slipshod. Coming from a place of efficiency, then I do think the players will optimise the fun out of a dungeon or any game where possible in the name of leveling. When building an area, do you have any sort of design principles in mind so dungeons can't just be speed run? Well, I was just talking about this. I'm sorry, there is a great deal of screaming from children in the next room. I've got to see what the latest conflict is. So regarding design principles to slow down characters, you just need to keep them thinking. I just detailed previously in this stream that you can hear back on Twitch different ways to do this, but you know, you don't want to have a linear design and you want to have enough surprises in there so characters are always cautious that there might be more. Um, but that's never going to stop it entirely. Putting up simple ways to do it would be putting up actual physical barriers. A door that requires a key where you have to go and get a key, or a door that needs to be broken down. You know, you can do it also in the design of your creatures. You can have creatures that don't do a great deal of damage but do have a great many hit points. Um, yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it. I detailed them earlier, but no matter what you do, you're gonna, just like you said, Slipshot. There's gonna be people speed running content. It really goes without saying. So that is gonna happen. Especially on a server like Arelith, where people are doing the same dungeon repeatedly, often over many real life years. They end up learning the layout entirely. It's partially why I like these occasional spawns. Some of them only have as little as a 2% chance, and they only fire every several hours, which means every now and then, just every now and then, someone might suddenly get surprised. And I was laughing a bit about this the other day on the stream because when people trigger these incredibly rare spawns, very often they will presume that there's a DM in the area, that this is part of some quest. And you see these people that are just running through a dungeon silently killing things. And then they all like suddenly stop. There's a pause, presumably one tells go between them. And then they all start role playing their socks off because they think that there is a dungeon master present. Sorry, more screaming. I have to pause the So yeah, just plenty of obstacles. If anyone's wondering why I am streaming my entire desktop, it's because Neverwinter Nights crashes when streamed. The tool set crashes when streamed as a program, so I don't have any option currently other than doing this. And Discord will also sometimes just cause it to slow down significantly. And when that happens, the tool set I mean, I have to restart Discord in order for it to work. Just putting a big hole in this room because the whole idea of these creatures is that they tunnel. But with this one I won't put a climb spot in. Just put down that invisible wall. You know what, maybe this is the big hole where they dump some bodies. If you're not eating them, maybe some creatures just don't taste so well, so I'll put a couple of corpse piles in there. As I say, these aren't evil creatures, but they are really quite alien insect creatures. They don't necessarily have empathy for civilized races. Um, Seeing them as either food or resources that can be exploited. They're also psionic. They will dominate. They will dominate creatures and use them. So yeah, this is obviously just where they're going to dump some of their unwanted flesh. Guess I can have these two rooms being symmetrical, but in one case I will put some kind of treasure in the room. You saw there that I copy and pasted something. It won't remember the scale when copy and pasting. So you have to do the scaling again separately. The invisible wall I put down there just stops the walk mesh from working there to make sure that nothing can, people can't accidentally walk over that. Here the bodies have been burnt. Who knows why? Maybe they had some kind of illness or infection that the Formians deemed to be a threat. You know, stuff like this. Characters will find their way to roleplay around. Don't necessarily need to give an explanation. The roleplay of characters will often do that in a slightly superior way. I think that flame's too big for that, really. I guess I could leave it there. Toolset has slowed down again, so might be related to Discord, what I was saying before, we'll see. The scrolling there is quite slow. I'll have a look, I'll soon have an idea whether it needs a Discord restart. Okay, so you can see how slowly that's rotating. This is a Discord issue. I'm going to just click the Be Right Back button on Twitch while I adjust these programs. Now we'll be right back. And for Discord, I'm going to stop the stream briefly, restart Discord, and then I'll be right back in 2 minutes. I'm still be on my phone on Discord, so I can still read questions in the meantime. But I have to Control or delete my way out of this. Okay, I should be back on. You can see now, anyone that's still watching, suddenly the tool set's back to normal speed. So this is what I was talking about, how Discord and the Neverwinter Nights tool set, even when doing the full screen stream, don't necessarily work very well together. So yeah, this is just where the Formians are dumping bodies. These are the soldiers, so presumably when they defeat warriors, they can't be used, they dump them. This is the, you can see characters have to come down here, walk here, so if I'm going to put a treasure chest I should put it in this second room, so it's just a bit further for them to go. I should have mentioned earlier in the stream, I do on all of the others, you can download the Arelith engine on the Neverwinter Nights vault. It's an outdated version, but you will find a lot of the resources that I am using here. It would allow you to build areas for Arelith or just create your own server that uses very similar systems. It's not very well explained, I have to say, because it's been the work of many different people. But if you're emulating what you see me do here, then yeah, it should be pretty possible to do. Sorry, I'm pausing here because someone kindly reorganized the palette for me here, which actually makes it quite difficult for me to find things. So 3 different types of treasure, low, medium and high basically. I can never remember whether mighty or improved is better here for weaponry. But there is an easy way to find out. I just check the variable. Improved is 10. You would presume that mighty is better than improved, but yeah, mighty is better. So we don't want the very top tier of weaponry here. Just see if I have a different model for this. Weapon stand. It's nice if treasure could just look a bit different. Presumably these are the weapons from warriors that they have defeated. You know, I could specify this with a flavor text when the characters enter. Just like these are the fallen enemies. You can see I'm clicking on this, but I'm having difficulty. I'm wondering whether the walk mesh is uneven in this spot. No, the walk mesh is fine. So more shouting in the next room. Okay. Now this is the mirror image, as I say, because Formians are incredibly lawful from a lawful plane. I'm keeping things quite symmetrical, but we have different types of traps here. And in this case, we have, it's very difficult to get in this room. The whole way in is blanketed by traps. But over here, we have a secret door. Characters enter this trigger. They will be able to have a search roll to see if they can spot the door. And if you see this little dot here, that's where the door will appear. They can then click on and move between the rooms. I should double check the walk mesh reaches it. It does. So in this room, I just want to have a lot of containers because this is presumably where a lot of plunder has ended up. I mentioned the other day that this is quite a long way into the dungeon already, and we need to always, if we can, put a sacrificial altar somewhere in these situations, because on Arelith you can raise fallen party members at an altar if you don't have any other means to do so, and rather than characters needing to turn back, it's good if they know they can fight their way through a bit further into the dungeon in the hope of finding an altar with which to raise their comrades. Now the problem here is that these are a planar power. They don't necessarily have a god. So if I have a room that's been full of plunder, full of things they have stolen or cleared from areas, then I can put an altar in here. You know, if I wasn't in a rush, I would probably, you know, tip these using the adjust location, make it look like they're more of just a pile of stuff. But yeah, I'm not really sure I want to spend time adjusting values, getting things piled on top of each other or leaning at angles. Because this is a big dungeon, I do want to get on with it. So one moment, I just have to mute again. Yeah, obviously when it comes to announcing streams, I try to do them in hours where people in the US are awake during a reasonable time of day. I mean, at this time, these are European hours. We're not likely to see many people online otherwise. If you're adding crates down, which I'm going to do now, don't use the ones from container here in standard containers. They'll contain like emeralds and fire opals and just stuff that shouldn't be in chests. Go to the custom palette, and again you can download the Arelith engine and see all of this. Download the engine and use it from the custom palette. Any treasure object put in the custom palette will draw treasure from an inventory area in the actual game that you can fill up via the DM client. You don't need to mess around with databases. You can literally just go to the inventory area and put whatever you want to appear in any chest in a master chest, and then it will pick randomly from that chest. The inventory area is called. I won't go to it now, but you can see it here. Pointing to it with a mouse. Inventory. There you'll see the master chests for all the different treasure containers that you can find here. So for instance, these are all junk containers, and they will contain junk, and so you'll see a chest in the inventory area called junk. In the default it has 100 limit, but you can change that to 500 as we have on Arelith, or even higher. So basically you have a master pool of many different objects, and yeah, it will draw randomly from there. On Arelith we have an extra script which will check the search of the character to see whether they uncover more treasure. So let's put down a sacrificial altar. One moment, I have to mute once more. Okay, I'm unmuted again. This is the custom palette. You can see me here. All placeables, dev systems and resources. It's laid out differently in the one that you would download from the Neverwinter Night Vault, but some things are the same. Sacrificial altar will be here in the miscellaneous. Of course, you're welcome to use this to experiment and then submit areas for my consideration to be added to Arelith, but I have to say that it's not easy to get areas accepted. Often I have to do a lot of post-production work, and it can take me a long time to review something, but I'd probably advise learning as much as possible. Perhaps waiting until I've done proper tuition videos before doing that, but yeah, you can always give it a try. So, just want to get across that this altar here is not any of their own gods, so I'm going to change its name to Salvaged Altar. And then the description, just write this This altar was uncovered by the Formians during their excavations. Unused and currently unused. Stored here, awaiting disposal. Obviously, when you're making a structure dungeon like this, you have different types of treasure to when it's a natural area. Natural areas, that tends to where we put most of our resources in. Areas that are a structure, more likely to have chests and containers. And junk chests can be pretty useful. There are stuff you can find there. This little placeable cluster here, by the way, this isn't going to stay here. This is just there so I can quickly grab objects that I would like to use rather than needing to go through the palette every time. In fact I know I said in a previous stream that with Formians ideally I'd like to have sort of mathematically entirely precise, quite alien looking areas, with weird rock structures and have it all look just extremely unusual, but that is not a luxury we have on Neverwinter Nights, at least not without considerable amounts of effort. So, I need to put them in a relatively conventional building. There aren't many decent, very alien tile sets on the Neverwinter Nights file, and if you want to create something like that, then it can just be a great deal of placeable work. Certainly some dungeons I've created have been, a huge amount of work sort of conceptually to achieve, and that's not something I'm aiming for here. This is basically to be a dungeon that I'm putting together quite quickly because I want to have this whole region of the Underdark filled with new mid to high level dungeons and a bit of a settlement springing up around the trade post. So I don't think I want a cauldron in here. I can just add a treasure chest, I guess. That's going to be enough. Really don't need a great deal of dressing in these areas. It's where you need to leave space for monsters to spawn and characters to fight them. So four types of treasure chests that aren't junk. That's the treasure, as in chests, armor, weapons, and literature. Literature is where you get the scrolls and magical books. I recently added a number of rather cool grimoires, so literature treasure can be pretty good, but this whole area is the military area, so I'm not going to add any literature treasure in this area, but I will in the next one. Okay, so these two large halls I'll just decorate with flags pretty much, just where people to pass through. One thing I really like with this tile set is it has these high ceilinged rooms, which are really quite lovely. It's a mixed blessing having ceilings. I mean, a lot of these hack content will have ceilings on new tile sets or put ceilings on existing tile sets, but yeah, then you run into problems with the size of monsters. Okay, I just check messages again. Well, on our Discord channel, where people can ask questions, people have instead opted to share cat emojis. I shouldn't have expected anything else.
Sorry, that's on me.
Anything reasonable I can answer there? Those books are neat. I've seen a few. Are they all high UMD? Yes, Synchra, they are. This is, I mean, it's not that high if someone's making significant investment. They're all around 35, I believe. You know, with UMD and lore is very predictable. The scrolls are basically an infinite supply, and this, I mean, I could talk about the lore change, which divided the player base at length, but high level scrolls in most single player campaigns are supposed to be rare. You're supposed to come across them extremely infrequently and use them sparingly. But on a server like ours, there were an infinite supply of them because, of course, you have level 30 characters running around scribing scrolls. So everyone had in their pocket a fistful of level 9 scrolls. And that was a problem when scroll use only required a minimum use magic device. You know, it encouraged characters also to have these OOC networks where your buddy would fit you up with all the high level scrolls you would ever need. And yeah, one of the many reasons I didn't like the situation as it was before. So the philosophy I'm trying to take is that use magical device is still very useful, but overall it's less predictable. You know, you're going to find some tasty things in chests like these books I mentioned, but they're going to be much harder to stockpile. So these books will allow you to use some very high level spells for 35 use magical device where lore would require twice that or even more. But with lore, if you get that high, then you know you can make sure you've got effectively an infinite supply of what you need. Use magical device requires on a spot of luck and a spot of exploration. Another reason I really didn't like use magical device allowing the use of scrolls, and for those people watching this on Twitch that don't know what I'm talking about, on Arelith I made a change that removed scroll use from use magical device, and it was incredibly controversial and continues to be divisive. But another reason that I did that was part of the Dungeons and Dragons experience to me is finding magical objects with unusual abilities, and that became superfluous when everyone could just access those same magical abilities by having an endless supply of scrolls. So the removal of scrolls from use magical device means that I have more of a capacity as a module designer to create interesting magical items like these grimoires we're talking about with lots of different spells and abilities, and we also see it on equipment for classes. Suddenly high level spells have value. If you pick up a magical shirt that allows you to cast, I don't know, premonition, it's suddenly a lot more of an interesting proposal than it was before, where characters would just say, "Yeah, that's junk. I've got 40 premonition scrolls in my inventory by the time I'm level 10." So I have my reasons for doing what I did, and I'm never going to go back on them. But nevertheless, adding more use magical device objects in loot containers to me makes it well worthwhile. Lindos, Irongron, can you tell us how it is decided whether a chest is an actual chest or a mimic? RNG, what can I say? It's a random number of some kind. Action Replay was responsible for adding mimics and putting the code in to make that determination. I'm sure he ran it by me in the when it first went through, but I forget a great many things, and I particularly forget things when they come from developers that I have every faith in. And so when Action Replay does something like that, I just know it's going to work and it's going to be cool, and it really was. So the only other thing I'd say on mimics is, okay, so he put a pair of human legs on a chest in the tool set. If one of our artists is watching this and now we have hack content, it would be nice to have some proper mimics out there. I want chests with teeth, preferably that are spitting blood. Sorry, I thought one of the children wanted to speak to me. They don't. He was just making faces at me through a glass door, so I don't need to mute for that. Quickly check Twitch to see if there are any questions there, which I very much doubt. 2 viewers, no questions. When we do these live streams, there are no viewers on Twitch, but we end up with more viewers overall on Twitch afterwards. I mean, the last video we did has something like 100 views already on Twitch now. Given just how obscure this is, building Neverwinter Nights toolset, not gonna become Twitch celebrities, but it's useful for the community, for players. So happy to do that. I will probably announce another proper stream this evening. I'm still mulling over whether to do that, but I do have an evening free today, so where I will have less family obligations. So I may pick this up later, especially because next week I'm on holiday and will hopefully be going away to another country or city. Not so far from Italy where I live. I don't often go there. 6 or 7 hour drive, and I could be in North Italy, which, coming from Britain, still seems like a terribly exotic location. So if I decide I'm willing to cross the Alps, I might just do that next week. Coming from Britain myself, I still find it hard getting used to living in Europe, where you have all these borders and you can just suddenly go to other countries with a minimum of effort. Where I live, I'm about 45 minutes from France, which will always feel weird, because if you come from an island, instinctively you expect oceans to separate you from other lands. I'm not quite sure why Formians would use flags, but I looked at all the different flags out there and figured these were probably the best ones to use for them. Oh, I tried to slide these as a group. Oh, my 3-year-old is calling me, showing me a picture. So I just leave this unmuted for a minute because I don't want to close that one. I've got that selected. And it's a lot of squarey lines. It's very good. Okay, I put it on the table. Ah, you can see here that this flag is not straight. Obviously the Formians are going to have their flags straight. Guess I presume that none of them are straight now. Oh no, they are. So I'll stop the stream relatively soon because I'm obliged to feed children. I'll just do these flags for a while longer. Someone was asking me the other day why I don't use hotkeys. Well, I generally don't have the keyboard to hand when I'm developing. You know, it's mouse and cup of tea. You know, even when I'm playing, sometimes I do like to revert to using the mouse, which can make me slower to respond in roleplay. Unfortunately, when I do this, it might suddenly make them all face the same way, which we can see it did. So, okay, that's not great. I have to do that manually. And next time, do that one at a time. In fact, that's no good anyway, they're too far away. Okay, copying pasting these was just obviously a bad idea. At least in that way. Problem is, with your copy and pasting like that, when you try and put them on a wall, they'll jump up to be sitting on top of the model, so they end up here, which obviously isn't where I want flags. It's just going to be quicker for me to slide them into place one at a time. I mean, what I could do if I was feeling clever is remove these pillars, put the flags in, and then add the pillars. And then obviously they would then be where I want them to be. So get them in place like this, then copy and paste them all into the correct location, and then add the pillars. And you know what, I am feeling clever, so I will do it that way. I won't make it mathematically precise, I will just do it by eye, but I'll show you what I mean. So look, these 4 are basically in place. Copy them. Go to always end up a bit too high unless I put it on the actual flat floor. Actually, I don't mind them being a bit too high. That a raised floor helps me center the flags. I'd rather do that than have to manually adjust the location on each. This one isn't straight. How does that keep happening? Well, I said this was clever. I'm not actually entirely sure it's less time consuming than the alternative. Also, that pillar isn't aligned in the centre, or the other thing wasn't, so... Okay, I'm taking back this moment of self-praise where I said I was clever. This is obviously just more effort than it's worth. So one thing I've noticed while doing these streams is that, you know, when I'm working alone, without streaming silently, I can do stupid stuff and not lose face, but I increasingly find myself publicly being wrong, you know, which obviously destroys that great mystique I've tried to build up these last years. Yeah, I mean, the biggest peril is people just see how dull this is, you know, for the most part. Area design is really quite tedious. Especially with areas like this where, you know, sure, some people are going to stop and role play as they run through killing monsters, but most people won't. They wouldn't care what's lying around in an area, only whether they can kill it or generate gold from it. One moment, I just have to mute the microphone. I was initially somewhat surprised at how popular these streams are, but then, you know, on Twitch you can tag your video to see what it's about, and of course I was tagging it as Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition, and then I saw that has thousands of followers on Twitch and no videos being made, you know, in the last like 14 days. So I don't know whether all those people then get a notification there's a new Neverwinter Nights video and expecting to be entertained by, if that's the correct word, by the Beamdog staff, and are instead confronted by me rambling on while using the tool set. So much like with the traps, I just want to get this out of the way quickly. flags. Should only take a moment, and then I'll see if anyone else has got any questions. Then I should really start thinking about feeding my children. Weather's not great here today, so probably got to keep them all entertained in the house, which isn't ideal, you know. If you do have children, I do discover that taking them out for a few hours a day just does them so much good. And being indoors for long periods really doesn't. Also, because this might sound ironic, I don't actually have like a console or anything for my children. I don't think it does them any good. Much as I spend my time doing computer stuff, they don't get the same luxury. Not that I want to use this channel to give parenting advice. Everyone has their own way of doing things. I just find that with consoles and computer games, children get properly obsessed. And yeah, stop using their imagination so much and just sit in front of a screen getting incredibly frustrated. Not unlike our own players. Now, unfortunately, frustration, much as I know many people love Arelith, it's really easy to get frustrated with it as a player. Particularly if you've not been watching the charges on your item and haven't been fixing it, and suddenly you find you don't have your weapon anymore because you've not been paying attention. I'm not sure how that's fun for anyone. Except maybe, you know, the schadenfreude of seeing it happen to other people, but schadenfreude isn't a great design philosophy, I'm afraid to say. Wonder if anyone's watching these streams is just an Underdark player wanting to get the inside track on a dungeon, know where the tricks and traps are. It's a great deal of effort to go to glean that information, so if that's what you're doing, then rather you than me. I think another advantage actually of streaming this is when some players have seen the creative process and something is broken in game, they'll be able to see that it's broken because they'd have seen the original intention on the stream. You know, I really need to get in and playtest every dungeon I make myself, and I'm ashamed to say I don't. I mean, not all of them, but I will always log in and watch other people do them. So, okay, let me just check to see if there are any messages coming through. Particle. I left a flag at 88 degrees. That was obviously intentional. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go through and make sure they're all perfectly aligned. But thanks for pointing that out. So yeah, these halls I just want to be pretty much empty. So characters can run through and just fight in them. Um, what I will do, and I'll do it at the end of the design process, at the end of this area, is just go through and add dirt patches and just marks and scuffs to the floors everywhere. It does a lot to make an area look alive. You shouldn't feel compelled to put placeables in every single area. It's really not necessary, particularly in dungeons, and you end up just putting shit down for the sake of it, which, frankly, I do a lot of. That's rotating slowly. Yeah, some dungeons will have a lot of sort of interesting features and puzzles. Others will just be dungeons for hack and slash. There isn't really a philosophy there other than, again, cater to different tastes and to different play styles. I think most of us like the idea of sometimes going through a very challenging dungeon where we have to think about it and figure it out, and I've certainly made a few of those in my time, and other times we just want to hit things and watch them explode in a shower of guts, or metal bolts in the case of constructs. Something I found when doing creature design, certainly coming from a player, is I think it's better to give a creature a low armor class and lots of hit points than a high armor class and few hit points. For no other reason than it's fun hitting something and it's not fun missing it. Even if it takes the same amount of time to kill it, not related to, sort of build mechanics or difficulty, it's just more fun to hear that clang and the thud of hitting something than it is to stand there waving your blade missing all of the time. So, my advice, make creatures easy to hit, but give them a lot of hit points, potentially discipline as well in some cases, and it's a great equalizer. I mean, I will do videos on creature design at some stage too, but this also comes into play with trying to cater for the wildly different armor class that some characters have. And, it's a problem with design. It's a problem with Neverwinter Nights and Arelith as far as I'm concerned. How do you design dungeons and areas when you have one character running around with an armor class in the 60s or 70s and another one of a similar level with an armor class that's 30 below? Now, the way I've been trying to do that when it comes to designing creatures is give the creatures really high AB. Give the monsters an obscenely high chance to hit, but doing quite low damage. And then armor class simply doesn't matter as much. I'm not saying do that with every creature, but certainly do it with some creatures. It's a good way to get around that. The other obvious way is giving creatures ranged touch attacks, but generally, give the creatures a high AB for their level, but a low damage output. Because when you start watching parties go through dungeons or individuals, a character with a high armor class at a low level, so you're talking about someone that's building for armor class, doing low mid-level content, they will often find they can just run through an entire dungeon without ever getting hit. And, it's not fun if you spent ages designing a dungeon and creatures, seeing that happen. So the temptation is to go in and make those creatures so they can hit that character, but then everyone else has a terrible time. So, lower the damage. High AB, low damage, high hit point, low AC creatures should be the default, in my opinion. You can have outliers, but, if there is a baseline for making creatures, give them a low armor class, high hit point, high attack bonus, low damage output, is my advice. That's how you'll cater to the most amount of characters and make it the most amount of fun. High armor class on monsters. It's just frustrating to stand there waving your blade at the air for half an hour, especially if you've also put in regeneration on the creature, then that's when you start properly trolling players. But okay, it's getting towards 1 PM now. I think I probably will announce a longer stream for later. I'll just see if there's any other comments. Kenji saying weapon masters love low AC mobs. Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. With PvE, weapon masters are a problem because of that crit output, but you put in the slimes, you put in the undead. Weapon masters are powerful, but anyone that knows Arelith knows that we have a huge amount of undead compared to other types of monsters. And if you play a weapon master, you're missing out on a lot of content, basically. Yes, you're making some of it very easy, but you're making a lot of it very hard. And I think a really key point there to raise is the recent point of the writ change. We are now in a situation where characters that want to level effectively need to visit every dungeon once. Now, before, a weapon master could just ignore all of those dungeons where their massive criticals won't come into play. But now, well, now they've got a problem. If they want to get that experience points, they've got to go through all these dungeons and fight all these creatures where their crit range isn't going to do them any good. So, is it worth it? I would say I'd say that a character with a decent damage output on a bludgeoning weapon is going to have an easier time with PvE content across all the writs than a weapon master running around with his scimitars. So, sure, of course, you can make the point that a lot of people choosing weapon masters are not doing it for PvE, they're doing it for PvP. So what about we add a consumable that makes people crit immune? Now there's food for thought. Some high-end craftable that gives you short bursts of crit immunity. Wow, would I be unpopular if I seriously suggested that? And right now, off the top of my head, I'm not sure that I'm not seriously suggesting that. But okay, DM Dionysus, you're entirely right about the AC hit points. I design the custom NPCs I make in the same way for events. That's from one of our DMs. Definitely like the vote of confidence there. I can really mess up making creatures. I make so many that I have in the past. Any knowledge I have is hard won. So okay, check Twitch. Although I'm 99% sure there's no comments on Twitch. There isn't. Just those same two viewers. So it's time to end the stream on Twitch. So that's the end of this latest Twitch video. I will be doing another one this evening. So thanks for watching, whether you're doing so now or in future.